Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another Bald Move Prestige film. This is a commission podcast. From 1993 to 1994, there were two movies made about the shootout at the OK Corral. Both featured amazing star-studded cast. One, Wyatt Earp, a sprawling epic headed by Kevin Costner, I've seen exactly one time. The other, Tombstone, I've seen at least 20. This podcast is about that film, Tombstone, the 1993 epic western directed by George P. Cosmatos, who directed Rambo 2 and Cobra. He's also the father of filmmaker Panos Cosmatos, known for Beyond the Black Rainbow and that crazy psychedelic Nick Cage Mandy movie you might have heard of. It's also written by Kevin Jerry. Rambo, known for Rambo, First Blood Part 2, Glory, Navy SEALs, and The Mummy. It stars lots of people: Kevin Costner, Val Kilmer, Michael Biehn, Powers Booth, Robert Burke, Dana Delaney, Sam Elliott, Stephen Lang, Bill Paxton, Jason Priestley is in this movie randomly. Michael Rooker. Yeah, that's right. Daryl's brother's in this movie. Billy Zane. What is Billy Zane doing in this movie? I bet you want to know.
Looking pretty.
And the late, great Charlton Heston. This movie is commissioned by a fellow Bald Move fan, Brent. Before we get into his dedication, like I said, I've seen this movie a billion times, Jim. What's your relationship with the movie and what'd you think?
This is the first time I've seen this movie, actually. I don't know why. Like, I remember 93, 94, where both of these movies, Tombstone and Wyatt Earp, were coming out back to back. And I've always conflated the two. And every time somebody mentions one of them, I'm like, oh, that's that 4-hour... that's a 4-hour movie that the adults were watching back when I was 11 about this shit. So I've never really given Tombstone a chance because Wyatt Earp came out at the same time and just ruined whatever weird mixed up image of it I had in my head. Having watched it the second time or for a first time nowadays, I'm kind of bummed that I didn't watch it sooner because it's a really cool movie.
It's, like I said, I love it. I think it might be my favorite Western. I'm not saying it's the best Western. That's a hotel chain.
Right.
But I'm not saying it's the greatest one ever made or anything like that. But I think it's my favorite one just to watch. And one of the reasons is because it's a quote factory. Like, everything that Doc Holliday says in this movie is suitable for quoting at various situations. Wyatt Earp is a quote machine. Just like everything that they say is just like, I don't like, you know, like 30s style gangster films have a certain kind of, you know, patter to them, like certain kind of like, I see the heat bulging in your pocket there, you know. This feels like that, only in the Old West. Like, skin that smoke wagon and see what happens. Like, I've never heard those words strung together. And I don't know if those are authentic old timey phrases. I'm your huckleberry. You're a daisy if you do. I don't know if any of that stuff is real, but it feels real and it feels real cool. I think that 90% of this movie's reputation is Val Kilmer's just amazing portrayal of this character of Doc Holliday. And deservedly so.
No, you mentioned like just a star-studded lineup at the beginning of this thing. You've probably rattled off 10 people's names that you've definitely heard of from the 90s, and they've become even bigger stars now. And yet, somehow Val Kilmer, the guy who really isn't a star nowadays, ends up blowing them all off the screen. Like, the only person who even stands close to toe-to-toe with him is Kurt Russell in what I would consider the actual starring role. But damn, I don't think of Val Kilmer as being this exceptional actor, but as Doc Holliday, he is really, really good.
Yeah, I just forgot that in this cast list I got off Wikipedia, they leave off Billy Bob Thornton. Billy Bob Thornton makes a brief but memorable appearance in this film.
I mean,
but yeah, Val
Paula
Kilmer,
Malcolmson, who plays Trixie in Deadwood, like, you know, you listed 15 people. There are still another 5 that you didn't list that you've definitely heard of. So it's crazy. And
there's also, like, if you're a real Western aficionado, they like a lot of like the people in the margins, like the town marshal is some like famous stunt coordinator from 50s.
Right.
It's like a real, like the more you know about Westerns, the more fun the watch becomes.
There's a
like
relative of Wyatt Earp in this movie. Wyatt Earp III is in this movie. Terry O'Quinn, who plays Locke in Lost, that you didn't mention. So like,
oh Jesus, I forgot. Yeah, he's the mayor of the town.
So many people in this movie.
Like I said, I cut out quite a few, like, you know, I read all the names, but there's tons more that just have like minor bit. It's amazing they got this much wattage on the screen. Mm-hmm. And it's just, for my money, just a really fun Western. Like if you don't even like Westerns, it's kind of fun because they don't really expect you to know much. Like I gotta say, like, I don't know. If you want a deep dive into historicity of this film and whether it lines, I don't really. This isn't a podcast or this isn't a movie for it either. Because from what limited amount of information I know, all of kind of like the lawmen, gunfighters, the Old West, all the reputation is like built up larger than life. A lot of the lawmen and outlaws change places over time. Like at one point, Wyatt Earp did dirty shit and then cleaned up his reputation, became the lawman here. Was like there's a lot of and a lot of being a gunfighter in the Old West was just like your willingness to kill a person.
Yeah.
And then because most people weren't, you know, most people still, you know, down back then and even today are not willing to kill another human being. If you are, then you're in like the top 1% of like, I guess, human predators. And if you survive a battle or two, you're into like 0.01% of people who can keep your shit together and be calm and collected and still drill people under fire. And this film is like a collection of those guys all come together. And there is a lot of truth to this. Like these people are, you know, like the loose story of events that actually happened. And then they add a bunch of Hollywood magic to it. This movie looks great. There is some scenes of the Old West, like at sunset and at dawn, that just make your jaw drop. It's an amazing kind of travelogue in that way. The dialogue is inspired. This is kind of a cursed production that I think that Jim will probably be talking about later on. Maybe before we get too much started, I don't want to forget about our commissioner here, because I've been wanting to do this movie for a long time. I've kind of been low-key up your ass to see this movie for probably 15 years. It's finally happened here this blessed day on January 2021. Commissioner Brent says, I was obsessed with this movie when it came out on VHS in 94. And at one point, I'm pretty sure I could recite every line of dialogue that Val Kilmer and Michael Biehn had. That same year, I took a pretty miserable road trip with my mom, her boyfriend, and his 4 kids, all crammed into one vehicle from northern Minnesota all the way to southern Arizona and back. The only highlight of that trip that I recall was getting to visit the actual Tombstone, which I remember being really well preserved, and the graveyard scenes in the movie appear to have been shot there, and the table Morgan was shot on still there with the infamous blood stain. Supposedly, I was just 13 at the time, so I didn't really think to question if it, and just took their word on it. One interesting production note I've read over the years is that even though he wasn't credited, Kurt Russell essentially stepped in as a director and saved the project after the first-time director was overwhelmed and quit after about a month. What do you want to start talking about first? Maybe I can give a little summary of the movie because, you know, if you haven't seen this movie, this is kind of spoiler-free account of what it's about. Wyatt Earp, who at this time is already famous for his exploits as lawman in Dodge City, brings his 2 brothers and their families out to this Arizona boomtown called Tombstone to make their fortunes and hopefully settle down to live a quieter life. Unfortunately, Tombstone has been overrun by the red sash-wearing gang of outlaws known as the Cowboys. Their reckless disregard for human life and decency seems destined to put them at odds with the Earp brothers, who have to decide between pumping this town dry for their own profit or standing for what's decent and right. You can probably guess the brothers opt for the latter, leading to one of the more epic tales of revenge and rough frontier justice that I've ever seen. Where do you want to start? Do you want to start in the beginning, like the making of? Because it's kind of a tale all to itself.
Yeah, there's a story around this. So what I could gather, I've looked into it on a few sources, and I found out that Kevin Costner was originally involved in this movie, like from the very beginning. He teamed up with
Tombstone?
Jarre. Yeah.
Okay.
He initially teamed up with, I'm going to say it, Jarre. I don't know how to say this guy's name. It's the writer of the film. Teamed up with him, and Costner and he worked on the story of the movie together, and the script and everything, kind of breaking the story. Costner was not happy with the way it was going because he wanted it to focus on Wyatt Earp. I bet he probably wanted to play Wyatt Earp, if I had to guess. He was like, I want this to be a really meaty role for me as I step into the Wyatt Earp shoes. And so he wanted to focus on Wyatt Earp's like family man to lawman sort of transformation or journey, whereas the Jarre wanted it to be more like action focused and be the relationship between Doc Holliday and Wyatt Earp. And so they never came to terms on that. And so Kevin Costner said, fuck it, I'm going to go make my own movie. But
called Wyatt Earp with 4 hours of Wyatt Earp.
right. And I'm going to star in it. Yeah. It's going to be the me hour, 4 of those. So Kevin Costner, apparently, I don't know, he seems like a real asshole sometimes. We talked about him in Waterworld and how he was just a real stickler for everything. And he was right. insisting on all these things. And it turns out here, what happened is he went around to all the distribution companies and said, hey, they've got this movie Tombstone. Fuck Tombstone. I'm coming out with Wyatt Earp. Don't distribute this film. And so no distributors in Hollywood would agree to distribute this film before they made it.
Oh my God.
And so production was like halted on this thing as they tried to find a distribution house that would do this. Buena Vista, which was owned by Disney, I guess, was the only place that was willing to do it. So they took it on. And then as a fuck you to Kevin Costner, when they got the deal to actually do this and they started production, the Tombstone production studio went around and bought up all of the period piece costumes and props in Hollywood, just rented everything so that Kevin Costner had nothing to shoot with. And so Costner had to go over to Europe to get the shit to shoot Wyatt Earp because there was nothing left in Hollywood. Tombstone took it all.
Wow.
They
beat him to market too, I think, which is not too hard because Kevin Costner tends to, just in this can't say about anything the other eras of Kevin Costner, but this era, Kevin Costner, the Waterworld era, the Wyatt Earp era, this guy, the Postman era, this guy kind of likes to blow budgets and timelines.
And it's a 4 hour, it's 3+ hour movie. It probably, and he was just getting it off the ground, whereas Tombstone had a head start. Yeah, I think it would have been hard for him to catch up. But that's not really the ending of this because there's a lot around the directing of this movie too. Because this was supposed to be, as you mentioned, Jarre's like first foray into directing. Not only was he going to write it, but he was going to direct it. So they got about a month into shooting and he had just missed a lot of shots, like just didn't get the shots they needed at all.
First time director shit.
Yeah, kind of blew it.
Schedule. Yeah.
So they kicked him off the project, or at least kicked him off the directing. And they brought in George P. Cosmatos, which, as you mentioned, is Panos Cosmatos' father, to direct this thing. But it came out in 2005 after he died that Kurt Russell started talking about this movie more. And Val Kilmer started talking about this movie more. And it came out that Kurt Russell, according to Kurt Russell and Val Kilmer, essentially directed this film, and that Cosmatos was a ghost director for all intents and purposes, like
almost like an executive producer, kind of like he was
a good producer,
doing budget stuff, and getting I guess he had a lot to do with the prop, like period accuracy of props and things like that. So like the screen accuracy, all that kind of stuff, the history of it. But Kurt Russell says he would like deliver shot lists for the next day every night, because, he was just like taking over this project, but he didn't want his name on it for some reason. And then in 2005, he comes out after the guy dies and starts saying all this shit. I don't know who to believe. Val Kilmer backs him up, says that he was basically doing it all. It's interesting because not only was he a ghost director on this film, but he has 2 other films which are pretty notable. One of them being Cobra, which according to the cinematographer of Cobra,
he was essentially a ghost director on that as well.
Oh no, Cosmatos.
And I saw in another location that his other film that he did, Rambo 2, he was actually, the reason he got hired on Tombstone is because Kurt Russell called up Sylvester Stallone and said, I need a guy to ghost direct this movie. Do you know anybody? And Sylvester Stallone was like, yeah, I got this guy who ghost directed Rambo 2. You want him?
And
George P. Cosmatos
for me too. What the? Well, why would? Because Sly's directed his own shit and wrote his own shit. What does he need a ghost director for?
Right. I don't know, man. I don't know. But apparently, like, and those are the only three things that I recognize from George Cosmatos' entire catalog.
Same. I think he did some stuff over in Europe, some like Greek and Italian shit. That's like, you know, but like that's wow. You went way further than I did. Wow.
Apparently, he never really actually directed any of those high profile films that he did over here in America. I don't know how the other ones went, but.
He's the director version of Tom Clancy. Just like, how many books did you write anyway? Red October,
he's the director
did you even write Red October, you bastard?
He's the William Shatner of directing, right? He writes these Tech War books, writes all of these Star Trek The Return and shit, but he didn't really write any of these.
Tech Rambo. Yeah, it's wow. That is even more, because I dipped a little bit into, but I heard that you were going like all in on the sword details, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna choke up on this and go on to some other stuff. Yeah. Wow,
it's wild,
and I do think it's kind of weird that they wait for this guy to die before they back up a dump truck full of dirt and like dump on his grave. Like, or maybe that's like kind of like not embarrassing him, but I don't know.
I don't know. Also, not letting him defend himself. Yeah, it feels a little weird and gross.
Anybody look to see if there's any ghostwriting dirt underneath Panos's fingers? Like, did Nick Cage actually do Mandy? This would actually make us start to making a lot more sense. I don't know. The second generation ghost director, Panos.
What a job, though. Like, I'll take that job if I can get it. I'll be Kurt Russell's ghost director. I'll be Sylvester Stallone's ghost director.
Guys, if it's that hard to find a ghost director, I'll stop and I'll swing by any set you want, sit around, say everything looks good. You guys are great.
Call action.
Every once in a while, say, hey, don't want to lose the light, and to gesture to my imaginary watch. Like, I can do this. I can do this. I can do it for cheap, man. You'd be surprised at how cheap I'll work. It's amazing with that big. So like, I guess Kurt Russell is an amazing director, because I think a lot of these instinctual stuff, like for example, that scene between Kurt Russell and Billy Bob Thornton, they told Billy Bob just to improvise all that dialogue. It's like, just act like a Wild West bully, and Kurt will just kind of like get into it. And like, I just think that's there's many great scenes of a dude showing up like a guy who's all hat, no cattle, as they say in Texas. You've seen that a bunch. And this is like one of the all-time great of just a guy humiliating another man into submission with the fact that you're essentially, you're only tough on people who are not tough themselves. Yeah. Don't even need a gun to do it. Can just go there, smack the cigar out of your mouth, grab you by your ear, toss you in the street. When you come back with a shotgun, he comes back, and now you're backed up by even a more badass legendary gunslinger, Doc Holliday, who I love the scene where it's like they just start talking, catching up, and Billy Bob's just kind of awkwardly holding the shotgun, and eventually Doc's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see you standing there. You can go now," and dismisses the guy. It's so good. It's so good. I don't know where Billy Bob was at in his career, because other than his voice, you wouldn't even recognize him.
Yeah, he's a lot thicker in this movie.
He's a lot thicker. He's wearing like old timey cowboy outfit, like you would imagine. He's, like I said, his voice is definitely Billy Bob Thornton. But he also plays
Sling Blade 3 years later. So that's kind of what put him on the map. Oh my God,
that was what put him on the map. So he's like thick in more ways than one in this film, because he also plays, like, I always associate Billy Bob as like, maybe with the exception of Sling Blade, as kind of like a clever. He's always a clever fellow, a sly fellow, charming. He's just like a fucking idiot. He's a quick to slap you idiot. But there's just so many things like that, like the technical details, the period pieces, the way they're able to some of these shots of the Old West, some of the kind of tricky action. There's a lot. I mean, a lot of tricky gunfighting. There's a lot of like technical horse riding and stuff that goes on here. A couple things where like when Kurt and Dana Delaney ride down that like 45-degree steep hill, like I just kept on thinking like, oh my God, you guys are going to break your fucking necks. It seems like it's not something that a first time director nor like an actor kind of dabbling and directing would fuck with. But man, they really pull it off. The other thing is, because of all the dirty tricks played in the distribution and the Kevin Costner project kind of overshadowing this movie kind of came out to little. It made a lot of money despite it, but it kind of came out late in the year. Roger Ebert didn't even review this film. I guess he did talk about it on the show, and he went and was constantly talking about the Doc Holliday performance, in other film reviews, but you can't find one in the archive because he didn't get a review copy. It's I don't know, like it's consensus now the best Tombstone, of the two films that came out about Wyatt Earp, it's the best Wyatt Earp film. But it kind of became that cult classic later on.
Yeah, it wasn't actually nominated for any awards.
Insane that Val Kilmer did not get like supporting actor.
Yeah, the only ones that did are like MTV with their awards. They were like best whatever, probably like best mustache or something, and like most desirable male, I think, is one of them that they did back then.
Most impressive mustache to Sam Elliott.
Yes.
Who, I mean, I don't know. This is, I was going to say, this is a mustache tour de force, but Sam Elliott just shows up ready to play. Like, he doesn't have to, there's no HGH or steroids involved in this. He just shows up swole. Upper lip swole, no problem. They also got a lot of like, oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was gonna say this movie did better in the box office than Wyatt Earp. That was just like critical and financial failure. But this movie made like double its money back on a $25 million budget. So not terrible. Then, I can't believe they got all that star power for $25 million. I mean, I guess back in like '93. They were it was just like rolling into the big salaries, right? For like $20 million for Jim Carrey to do another movie or something.
Right. And a lot of these guys were just complete unknowns. Like Michael Rooker, was just a big guy. Jason Priestley, was still in the middle of 90210, I think. Bill Paxton was a genre guy. Mm-hmm. No one knew who the hell Stephen Lang was. Like, in fact, the only thing I've seen him in a bunch of different stuff, but the one that sticks out in my mind is the Blue People movie, Avatar. Yeah. He plays he plays like a fucking buffoon in this movie, and he plays like a real cold, calculating, tough dude in Avatar. Mm-hmm. Dana Delaney was like small screen, so like her. I feel like they got, and Powers Booth same way, is more of a small screen kind of guy. Kurt Russell and Sam Elliott, I guess, is probably the two biggest names. So, and it's Western, because at the time, Westerns were kind of still kind of like, oh, this is kind of old timey. I know Unforgiven, I think, was made 2 years before, which is probably why you had some of these Westerns greenlit. But Westerns kind of like, a throwback, kind of like making a musical today. Like, oh, okay, we'll see how it goes. But it all, like I said, it comes together to be much more than the sum of its parts, which are already kind of formidable. I really like some of the touches to the details. Like, everyone spits tobacco. It's kind of disgusting. Yeah, like they're always spitting tobacco, wiping tobacco juice on their sleeves, wiping it out of their mustaches. Like in the saloons where everyone is showing their appreciation for like a good piece of dramatic acting by just firing up into the ceilings, because I guess it never rains in Arizona, so why the fuck not? Sure. The details of like, I really liked the film within a film they do, this production of Faust, and they show like the lighting guys like shaking this like amber liquid to give it kind of like some surreal lighting. I really like the mortuary work of these guys that were slain at OK Corral. Like they're all done up like very howdy doody, and I guess that's very very accurate as well. In their glass coffins. Yeah, it felt real. Like when the Earp brothers are all riding into Tombstone in the very beginning, you're going through all the different hotels and saloons and mining things. It does look like a booming frontier town. Like it looks lived in. And I thought it was really cool. Also, they take this is kind of a gangster film. They made out like in the narration at the beginning, which what do you think of that intro? I always forget that intro is a part of the movie, and it starts up with the old timey stuff and the like stilted narration telling you like it's kind of like the opening crawl in Star Wars, only Wild West. And I'm like, oh, what the fuck? You don't need. But they make that analogy that like this is essentially the first organized crime in America. These guys that got together, they were I think they were like old Civil War vets and outlaws that were wanted back east, and just these gang of ne'er-do-wells and that kind of ran shop out there when there was very little law and conflict between what was town law and county law, and it's still a territory, not a state. I
liked it. As far as like providing some context, I think it was almost necessary. It identifies the red sashes prominently, so that every time you see them, okay, these are the bad guys. It also does a little character foreshadowing for Michael Rooker's character, whose name I don't know, to later join up with Doc Holliday and Wyatt Earp, and turn against the Cowboys. I think it all works, and it establishes Powers Booth, which is interesting, because I thought based on that opening scene that Powers Booth, his character, I don't know his name in the movie,
Curly Bill.
Right, Curly Bill was going to be the main villain, but it turns out that Michael Baine's character is really more of a main villain, Johnny, whatever his name is, Johnny Ringo, because they pretty unceremoniously kill Curly Bill, and then it changes focus over to Johnny Ringo, and I was surprised by that, but I guess that's got to be some historically accurate thing, right? Because neither of them were at the shootout at the gunfight at the OK Corral, right, which surprised me that you wouldn't have that big moment be sort of the culmination, the climax of the movie. But if that's how it happened in real life, I guess I didn't want to stray too far from that.
No, it's really cool how the gunfight at the OK Corral is kind of like a transition from like first act to second,
Yeah.
And then culminating to kill like the killing of Curly Bill, which then sets off the final arc of Ringo. But I guess Johnny Ringo was like Curly Bill's lieutenant. So and you're right, and they also play fast and loose because I did a little bit of research, and I guess it's widely thought that Johnny Ringo killed himself. Like, he suicided himself, I guess, at this spot where they had the duel, but it wasn't at the hands of Doc Holliday or Wyatt Earp. But yeah, I thought like narratively this film had a lot of cool structure. Like they set up these guys raiding this Mexican town and, killing these lawmen, these Mexican lawmen that had the temerity to try to like rein in their activities. It felt very much out of Narcos, where they ride in like, oh, you think you're this and that. It's during a wedding. They kill everybody. They have this priest spit this curse. That's a sick ass quote from Revelation about a man riding a pale horse coming and death bringing him. And then that leads up Kurt Russell, like kicking off the epic tale of revenge and the back half of the movie, screaming words to that effect that like, you want the thunder? Well, now here it is. Run, you cur. Tell him that I'm coming. And death's coming with me. It's
hell's
great.
Coming with me. Yeah,
hell's coming with
No,
like
so
they have all these kind of like through lines. I don't think it's a perfect film.
No.
The big flaw that I have is the fact that they try to do anything with Wyatt Earp and his wife's relationship. Like, and like it's like she's set up so that you won't feel too bad when he just up and leaves her.
Sure.
And then when the film's narration lets you know that, oh, she actually died of opium addiction. You saw that coming, right? it's totally cool that Wyatt Earp just kind of left her for this hot actress lady. Like, she's just set up there to be a bitch that's like a stick in the mud and drinking laudanum and all that. And it just like every time she's on the screen, the like movie comes to a screeching halt. And
they do the bare minimum with her, but I think like there's also a theme of like their relationship isn't all that you might want it to be, right? Like it's apparent that she's drinking this stuff, sedating herself and drugging herself because he's never around. But that's probably like, well, he's also never around because she's doing this, and like there's this cycle, right? And I don't know who started it. I don't know how it started, but
and
clearly it's feeding back into each other. No, it doesn't.
Like the movie doesn't care to tell us like, is this a story of them used to be in love and love cooled off, or is this a story of like, he kind of settled and she realizes that, and it's like, but it really doesn't. There's a couple, I mean, it feeds a couple clever lines. I really like the thing where Doc Holliday is kind of goading him at the bar. It's like, oh, it's like, oh, you're faithful to your wife. What would you do if this hot devil lady shows up? And he literally turns a cold shoulder on him and he comes back. It's like, what was his quote about, I stand corrected, Wyatt, you are an oak. I love quoting that anytime I see family or friends resisting temptation.
And I mean, he stands corrected through the whole movie, It's only at the prodding of Doc Holliday on his deathbed that he ever even considers, I think, the idea of going off with Josephine. Is that her name?
Yeah, Josephine, the devil lady.
Leaving his wife for Josephine. Although I will say, I will take like, the story of his wife and him being the weakest part of this movie and extend it even further, because I don't think the love story between him and Josephine is very good either. I think that first scene where they meet on horses, the meet cute they have in this movie is atrociously paced, atrociously set up. And the entirety of it just feels like this unreal dream state that I keep expecting any moment I'm going to be jolted out of. And it's going to go, okay, well, things couldn't possibly have happened that way. It's like the most extreme version of a meet cute that you can imagine in the Wild West.
It's not even a meet cute. It's a Wild West porno setup.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. Oh, your mare's in heat. Oh, my horse wants to mount it. We'll have to run it out of him. We'll have to work up a sweat. It's
the ADR is bad. Like they're dubbing over all these lines, and it doesn't, because nothing adds to that unreal quality. Like they end up in a field of flowers underneath the trees where like, okay, maybe flowers can grow there, but like they seem almost hand placed in the shot. It's all too fake for me. None of it feels good.
I don't think Dana Delaney and Kurt Russell have particularly good chemistry. Also, it fucks with the flow of the movie, because this movie is about Doc and Wyatt's friendship, and the movie is over when Doc dies. Like that is the climax. That is not even the climax. It's the coda to the movie. But I guess you have to have Doc send him away to do something, and but that's what I'm saying. Like this movie, it might pass the Bechdel test only because there's a brief scene of one woman asking another woman for a bottle of laudanum for her headaches, and it's not technically about a man. And they're just having a conversation, just us ladies, about how our husbands are so miserable, we need opium to get through the day. But like, this movie is not interested in, like, in fact, like when Dana Delaney shows up, it's essentially a monologue of I'm not like other girls. And Kurt Russell, like, I like you because you're not like other girls. I don't know. Like, I didn't need any of it. And I don't know, this movie's not overly long. It is slightly over 2 hours. And I do feel like that maybe the movie would be stronger if it had those 15 minutes out of it. You could still have the acting troupe, because I thought some of those scenes were pretty good. But the whole thing, because also there's this love triangle between her and Behan. Like Behan's ever going to be able to get over on Wyatt Earp on anything. And there's a lot of like weird stuff with the town politics that I think they could have done more on. Like, you got this mayor that's constantly asking these famous, fearsome lawmen, they're like, hey, can you give us some help with this fucking gang problem? They're like, nope, too busy making money. But I thought that was interesting, like the conflict between the county law versus city law, and this guy who's like the craven city sheriff who's also just lining his bed with all these feathers. Like, yeah, I'm also on the town realty commission and I'm the chamber of commerce. Like, I actually like that character, and he needed more to do than just to be impotently angry that he can't win this actress's affections over, you know, the badassness that is Kurt Russell.
Yeah, like after the gunfight, he comes out and he's like, "I'm arresting all four of you."
That's such a
and
great
they're like,
line.
"Nah, you're not. Nah,
Yeah, no behan. Don't think I'm going to let you arrest us today." It's so good. And I think the thing that really shines best about this movie, other than Doc and Wyatt's relationship, is the dialogue. And I guess a lot of his dialogue comes from contemporaneous historical sources, like reports from the actual gunfight. Like when the one guy says, "I'm going to get you, Doc Holliday, you son of a bitch." And he says, "You'll be a daisy if you do." Quote from a newspaper headline about this shootout. Biographical details. Like apparently when Doc Holliday dies, he asked for a shot of whiskey. He drank it. And he said, you know, well, it isn't that funny, and then died. And they worked that dialogue into this film. Like I said, just all the different phrases and stuff they say and gunfights, like I guess I really like the stuff between like Johnny Ringo and Doc Holliday. You know, like Johnny Ringo is the up and comer. Doc Holliday is kind of like past his prime, just essentially trying to do the Leaving Las Vegas plan. Of like, I'm going to drink and smoke and gamble myself, because who the hell wants to die of consumption in some kind of ward? I'm going to die with my boots on, and trying and failing to do that. But they're like, yeah, when they're square off and they realize like they hate each other because they're very similar to each other. And that kind of fuels it fuels the scene where, like, you know, after the first epic killtage and Doc's having, you know, going through his illness, and Johnny Ringo calls out Wyatt Earp. That whole scene, like, I remember seeing that for the first time in the movie, and I was thinking, like, Jesus Christ, how's Wyatt going to do this? They're telling me that, you know, he's going to die at this gunfight. What's that's going to look like? And then, you know, Doc Holliday saves him. I just love every little bit of that.
Yeah, those confrontations between Johnny Ringo and Doc Holliday are two of my favorite scenes in the entire movie. When, you know, he's, like you said, he's calling him out, Wyatt Earp. He says, "Don't any of you have the guts to play for blood?"
In the streets.
Val Kilmer, well, you know, he's standing over there leaning against a pole or whatever with his hat down, and looks up. "I'm your Huckleberry." It's such a good line.
Just my game. And then like it builds up all this respect, because you don't. They have a pretty badass scene of Doc Holliday getting the drop on some tub. And you get the idea that, like, maybe Doc Holliday cheats at cards and maybe he cleans out towns as he goes. But you never really see him, like, draw down on somebody. It's just a threat. And you kind of wonder, like, is he as good as they say he is? And the whole movie, you just build up to his legend. Even like when, you know, Johnny Ringo respects him enough that, like, he doesn't really want any part of Holliday, as drunk as he is in that one scene. But he keeps on prodding him. And then he's like, "All right, Lunger, let's go." And like all the cowboys just tackle him like, "Oh, no, he's drunk. It's okay." Because nobody wants any part of Holliday. And then every time, like, you know, you get to see him like in this, you know, mass shootout. But that one-on-one scene of him and Ringo, that's another thing. Like, this movie just builds tension effortlessly. Yeah. Like, I love when the Earp boys go and Doc go to shut down the OK Corral thing, and they're just showing these like intense, like, just everybody's, all you can see is their eyes and their mouth, and they go to all the different one, like Bill Paxton, he's the young kid, he's nervous. Sam Elliott's resolved. Wyatt doesn't even want to be there. And fucking Doc Holliday winks at one of the dandy guys to kind of like egg him on. And then Kurt Russell is like, "Oh my God," as he knows that's the part on the roller coaster where the hill's going to hit. God, it's so good and really well staged action. Yeah. One other criticism, I wish they don't pay any attention to how many shots are shot from these six shooters. Like, you know,
I wasn't either, though. I am a lot of the time, but I got lost in the whole vibe and the tension of it.
And it looks cool, like when Doc's like fan firing, pow, 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 and he's saying such sick shit. Like the one guy, like, you know, everyone's always constantly like, you know, because he looks like if you've never seen this movie, Val Kilmer looks like he's always 5 minutes away from dying.
And
he's
every scene he looks worse, man. Paler.
His eyes are rimmed red. He's paler,
sweatier,
sweat. And like a drunk a lot of times, like super fucking drunk. That once where a guy's like, you know, I think we can take Doc Holliday. He's so drunk, he's seeing double. And he pulls out the second gun. That's all right. I got a gun for each of you. It's just so good. And honestly, all of the confrontations, like Ike Clanton, it chaps my ass every time I see this movie and they let him get away, because he starts so much shit. He's like that little dog in the Tom and Jerry movies. It's always like bouncing around the two big and tough dogs, you know, like Curly Bill's trying to like talk shit to Wyatt Earp to see if he's there to be a lawman or if he's there to deal cards. And Wyatt Earp's like, that's right. Or no, Ike's like, that's right, law dog. We don't take kind of your law dog shit. And like, you know, Kurt Russell's like, yeah, I heard you the first time, Ike, you know, as he's still dealing cards. But he's so fucking craven because like he's talking mad shit because he's surrounded by his buddies when he's trying to get like the drop on Kurt after they shot the town sheriff. And he draws his gun and puts it right in Ike's head and is like, yeah, your guys might be able to get me, but not before I turn your head into a canoe. And the cowboy's like, oh, he's bluffing. And Ike's like, no, he ain't bluffing. And like he does that move like 3 separate times, like pulls Craven. And they let him get away with it. And I just wish they drilled him. I wish when he threw that sash into the air, they just went ahead and shot him anyway, because fuck Ike Clanton.
Yeah, he's an instigator. You know, half of the shootouts happen because he's there pushing people's buttons. That scene, you know, when they're in the lounge, I forget what it's called. You know, the one where he goes and throws Billy Bob Thornton out. Takes over.
And the star, whatever the saloon is. Yeah,
it's probably my favorite scene in the entire movie. It's when Johnny Ringo comes up to the table and he's twirling his guns. You know, like Michael Biehn must have practiced for out of hours and hours.
I guess
to do
they
this
all did.
Because some of that shit, you just couldn't do the fakery in '93, right? Like where they're doing wide shots and he's like flipping it sideways.
Yeah,
Michael Baine's doing a lot of that. And then Doc Holliday, Val Kilmer, takes his glass, which he's been using, his little shot glass thing, and he's doing the same tricks with it, spinning it around and then holstering it. And it's just so funny. And it doesn't. So I see this as an insult, right? I see this as like, oh, you think you're so fancy twirling your gun around. That's all just show. And look, I can do it and make you look stupid too with my stupid glass. He backs off. Johnny Ringo backs off at that point. I'm not actually sure why that doesn't just piss him off even more. And I don't know if it's because like, you know, Ike's there, you know, instigating shit, or like Curly Bill's there to like calm him down or something. But they just walk off.
I've seen this movie a ton of times, and I think about this. There's a couple scenes I think about because, like, it's also another brilliant way to build the tension because, like, Johnny and Doc kind of want to kill each other in the scene, but there's 2 things warring against it. Number one, like, I think the ball's in Doc's court. Like, they have this back and forth and talk about, like, if they hate each other, and then they quote Latin each other, and then it's tense, and, like, Ringo pulls the gun. If he kills Doc Holliday, it's like, there hasn't, you know, he'd probably go to jail because he's in front of a bunch of, you know, but he holsters the gun. He does all that thing to kind of show Doc, if I wanted to, I could plug you. And then Doc, you can see kind of like finish his drink and like everyone's watching, like you can hear a pin drop in his bar and he starts up his like shot, you know, his silver shot glass routine. And it's like the perfect, and man, they build the tension so well because you see Kurt Russell like grab the shotgun underneath the table and start swiveling it. Like, God, everyone's going to die here.
Yeah.
But Doc has the only way he can get out of this without a confrontation and save face, and he pulls it. And you can see on Johnny Ringo's face, I think Michael Biehn does a great job of playing this guy who thinks he can kill everyone in the room, but he's really not sure about Doc Holliday, and he doesn't really want to go to hell yet. Right? Like every single time Doc confronts him, and it happens 3 times in a movie, he always tries to back down until there's no way out in the final confrontation.
Yeah.
And Doc not only kills him, but like does it like as much as they built up Ringo, that no one can, like he plugs him and he does it so easy and so quick, and then talks mad shit as the guy's dying. It's a way of like just continually amping up the pressure and just letting it bleed. But I guess it's because also like the reason Doc backs down is that he doesn't want to wreck his friend's saloon,
Mm-hmm.
So like Johnny doesn't really want to call out Holliday, and Holliday doesn't want to come, but he also doesn't want to like look like a weak person. So it's great. It's great cowboy psychology, I felt like. There's this quote I found that Wyatt Earp said about Doc Holliday when he heard that he had died. And this is from a contemporaneous source. He says, Doc was not a dentist nor a lawman, or Doc was a dentist, not a lawman or an assassin, who necessity had turned a gambler, a gentleman whose disease had made a frontier vagabond, a philosopher whose life had made a caustic wit, a long, lean, ash-blonde fellow nearly dead with consumption, at the same time the most skillful gambler and the nerviest, speediest, deadliest man with a six gun that I'd ever knew. And Val Kilmer like embodies every single word of that description.
Except maybe the blonde.
I thought he was kind of ashy blonde, kind of. You don't see his hair very often because he's covered in that black hat. But yeah.
No, Val Kilmer is outstanding in this movie. Like he wasn't super well known at the time. Like he was going to go on to do things like The Saint later.
He did Top Gun. Like that's probably what he's most famous for.
For sure.
What's that Real Science like nerd movie?
What was that called? It wasn't Weird Science. It was like Real Genius. Yeah.
Oh, Real Genius. I said Real Science. That's what. Yeah. But no one knew he was capable of something like, this kind of like, method type of acting. Like,
no, that's the thing. I see that. And he's great in Top Gun. He's an asshole. He's a villain. He's everything he needs to be. But then like you look at his performance of Batman Forever, and it's such a wooden, just like stick of a performance that I wouldn't have guessed he was really going to be this good just a couple of years earlier. And it must be down to directing, right? They told him, okay, you're playing this very uptight guy. But you look at like Michael Keaton's performance as Batman, he's 1,000 times better. He's got more charisma on the screen in his little finger than Val Kilmer has in his entire body, his entire cowl. It's remarkable like how good he is in this compared to something like Batman Forever.
Well, I do think it's all about like, did he respect the project? Did he respect the people making it? I imagine Joel Schumacher. No, none of those. Like, he didn't really care about anything. And then also, like, if you want to see a Val Kilmer performance, you got to check out The Island of Dr. Moreau, where he and Marlon Brando are having a who can give the fuck least contest. Like who can bully the director into more bizarre. Like I feel like they collaborated to just terrorize whoever made that poor movie, because it's just bad choice after bad choice after bad choice. And I do think it's like, it was up to whether, I don't know how they got, like, because I like The Saint. I wonder if that holds up. I really have fond memories for The Saint.
Yeah, me too.
And you got this performance, and he's done some other like good work, but it's, I guess, garbage in, garbage out. And he really believed like in this project. Oh yeah, he's really good in that too. So if you respect the material and the people he's making it with, then you probably got a good performance. If not, he just would, either not show up or run roughshod over you.
Yeah. They originally wanted Willem Dafoe to play that character. Did you know that? I did. And that he was a radioactive because of Passion of the Christ and all the protests around that. So the distributor Buena Vista, the Disney company, said they didn't want any part of him. So they brought Val Kilmer. I think Dafoe would have been a pretty good Doc Holliday, to be honest. Wait, it couldn't have been Passion of the Christ, right? That's 2004.
Or Last Temptation of Christ. I'm sorry, The Last Temptation of Christ.
I was going to say that makes way more sense.
And it's every, like, he is hilarious and awesome in every scene. Like when he's egging on Ike, he's just taken Ike to the cleaners and embarrassed him, probably cheating on cards. And he's at the end when he calls him and cleans him out, it's like, that's okay, Ike. Maybe poker just isn't your game. I know. Let's have a spelling contest. He's just like, some of the stuff he says is just legendary and so funny. Here's another thing that I'm not so sure about. Curly Bill goes on an opium binge and then starts terrorizing the town.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think opium works that way. I don't like alcohol. Absolutely. He storms out really drunk in a dark mood. But like opium, I feel like he just passes out in the den. He doesn't come out and start shooting up the town and murdering the town sheriff and all that. I wish they'd come up with a different inciting incident than those dirty Chinese and their opium tents. It's the devil's poppy.
We're sure the alcohol just totally acceptable, normal drug for people to be using constantly.
Yeah, that's not a problem.
That's an American drug. Let's talk a little about Wyatt Earp. I love a lot of his lines too, right? You talked about the tell him I'm coming and hell's coming with me. I like in the beginning of the movie, they set him up as like this guy who's coming into town to make some money. He's already got a reputation from his stuff in Dodge City. And he's coming in. He says, somebody said, I don't know any rich men without a guilty conscience or something like that. And he says, I already got the guilty conscience. Might as well have the money too. Great line. There's one scene where I'm not certain it works for me. What Kurt Russell is doing and the dialogue that he's given. It's where he walks out in the miracle scene, right? Where he walks into the middle of this river when he's surrounded on all sides by the shooters, by cowboys, and he's just screaming, no, 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 no. Like, I get what they're going for, like this miraculous, Pulp Fiction-esque, we should be dead kind of thing, and building his legend. But the dialogue there, just him saying no over and over, came off as funny to me in a moment where I really didn't want it to be.
I think if they edit, because I believe, especially it's actually really, especially the weapons at the time, it's really hard to hit people, especially in the moment where people are trying to shoot you, and the bullets weren't as good, the sights weren't as good, the guns themselves weren't as good. People, these aren't like hardened soldiers. They're just people that like have a reputation for shooting each other. It's kind of like, like in The Wire, like how hilariously non-menacing a lot of those gunfights are. It's just people trying to like, God, and cringing and like shooting, and they're not even aiming and shit. So it's like, I kind of believe it. But yeah, like if the nose were more powerful, if they were paced more properly, and if they did a little bit more editing to bang the nose, where it's like, this guy's like, okay, I'm going to get all my friends killed unless I turn the tide right here, right now, and almost like call out single hand, like the challenge Curly Bill to single combat. But you're right. It doesn't exactly work.
I feel like it's one of those 90s things where it's just like 90s movies never quite hit the highs of the drama that I think we're hitting now. Filmmakers get better at making films. They refine these
stunts,
moments. And for me, just like the camera work and the dialogue and the acting are all just like barely able to string this scene together. Whereas nowadays, I think you put this in the hands of, a non-ghost director, somebody who's like there for the fucking job, not because they need to do it. I think you get a much better performance in this scene, or much better result.
The other thing that I think doesn't quite work, especially the more I watch it, the more it bothers me, is just how dumb the Earp brothers are after the OK Corral, when they know that the cowboys are gunning for them, and like Virgil just walks home alone. And on the night that Virgil gets shot, like Moore goes to cool off at their saloon, and he turns his back to this big picture window, like as he's shooting pool. Now, I think it's because they wanted to get the historical details of that right. And in real life, the cowboys bided their time, kind of laid low for 5 months, let the Earp brothers get comfortable. And then, whereas this movie, they have to make it feel like bang, bang, bang. These things just happen. So like the brothers look stupid because they got canonically shot in these situations. Well, the reason they were stupid is because the Cowboys let them get comfortable, and you're gonna live on a hair trigger the rest of your life. But it doesn't quite work. However, as much as I talked about how limited the women's roles are, there's a couple things that like I think are effective. Like they really sold like Sam Elliott and his wife, how much he loves his Irish wife. And that scene where like his doctor tells him he'll never be able to use his arm again, and he hugs his wife and says, "That's okay, Ellie. I'll still love you with my one good arm." I thought that's always I think that's sweet. And they do Bill Paxton. Like, it's so funny because they keep going from like all these like chiseled dudes like Kurt Russell and fucking Sam Elliott and, almost on death's door Doc Holliday. And then you've got like Thomas Hayden Church and all these like tough dudes. And then it keeps on going like to Bill Paxton. He's kind of like chubby and his mustache isn't very good. And he's nervous and unsure of himself. Well, I mean, that's kind of what he does. Like he plays like the guy.
He plays a literal pile of garbage at one point, doesn't he?
In this movie?
No.
Probably. But like, they gave him a little through line that he's like the baby brother, and he's kind of like ponders the mystery of life. They had this throwaway line about like what people say that you see a light when you die, and when he's dying, and he says, "Hey Wyatt, those people are full of shit because I can't see a damn thing," right before he dies. Like that always gets me too. Like your baby brother dying in your arm, calling back this conversation you guys had when you first came to town and your head was full of dreams. They do a really good job of using what sketches they did. Cause like Bill Paxton has maybe 5 minutes of screen time. They really do sell kind of that. And it really fuels the epic revenge, because this has got one of the most well executed killtages of any movie I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Like they do two different like 5 minutes, like quick shooting, like, and there's all really great stuff. Like they go in an opium den and like the Cowboys are passing each other a pipe, and Wyatt Earp puts his like long 10-inch Colt 45 barrel and the guy puts it in his mouth. And like there's some really sick shit going on. This like leaning off the horse side saddle shooting. Him and Doc shaking hands when they do finish off the last cowboy on horseback, riding at full tilt. It's really, really odd. I mean, I'm always impressed with horse stunt work. It's dangerous. It's hard to capture on film. It's expensive, and there's a lot of it in this film, and it's great. It's great.
Yeah, and I think they did a great job of delineating the brothers. Each of them feels like their own independent character, right? It doesn't feel like, well, let's just combine all the Earps into a single character and then give them all these lines. It feels like they're very different characters. They want different things. They react differently to prompts. They did a good job there.
Especially since like you can tell like it starts bothering the brother. Like there's this like even before they even bring it up, like you can tell like Sam Elliott's really having a hard time swallowing what they're doing to this town and what they're allowing to happen. And then there's a scene where like they almost run over this little boy and he saves him. His mother's got this ugly slash. Like, we've seen Unforgiven. We know how this works. And like, him going against Wyatt, and then you think that the baby brother's going to back Wyatt's play, but then turns out he's been deputized. And like, there's a scene where like, cause Wyatt's still the holdout, and he's like, you guys are going to give us killed and you shouldn't do this and you didn't that. And then he's like, all the same, Virgil, maybe you should swear me in. Cause he knows he's not going to stay out of this when the whole family's in on it. There's also a really great moment where Wyatt's saying goodbye to his posse, with the exception of Doc Holliday, because he's back sick, and he's going off to die, and they all know it. And the guy says, "I ain't got the words," when he comes to say him. And I'm like, God, I got to remember that, because a lot of times when someone's dealing some heavy shit, you try to like say, "Oh, I know how you feel," or "I went through this," or like, but like, I ain't got the words. Like, who fucking does in this situation? Yeah. And it's a great line. And that moment that he and Doc Holliday have, I think it is when Holliday's resting because he's sick out at what my notes auto-corrected to Charlatan Heston. Pretty hilarious. Old charlatan.
But out at Henry Hooker's ranch. They're talking about what makes guys like Johnny Ringo and whatnot do what they do. And Kilmer, Holliday sums it up as just like there's this hole inside them that they, no matter how many people they kill or whatever, can never fill. And it's revenge. Like they're trying to get revenge for being born. And you feel like in that performance, in that moment, Doc Holliday understands that intrinsically, right? There's some outlaw part of him that would be the same guy if things broke a little differently.
Yeah. And he knows, like, he used to be a doctor. He was like a Southern, as an aristocrat, like these guys, like they have this feeling that like I was born for something better and now I'm here. Or because I didn't, like my daddy beat me and was a drunk and killed my mom when I was 3. I don't know what these guys' details, but like, yeah, they're just like, why did you give me all these skills and abilities and then put me into the fucking squalor? Like, why, like, and they're just trying to get, revenge for being born. A great line. Mm-hmm. And then, like I said, the true emotional climax of the film is Doc's death, and Wyatt Earp, well-meaning, and like they had this like Elizabeth Shue leaving Las Vegas character, this soft, sweet Hungarian devil that's like. I thought. Let me talk about that for a minute. I remember because I've seen this movie like fucking man and boy. I saw this movie early on because every once in a while I've mentioned that my mom would pull rank and like we would watch a rated R movie because for whatever reason because she like did that with like Schindler's List or like JFK, and then every once in a while my old man would do it. And like my dad loved fucking westerns, so he made it known that he was going to rent and we were going to watch it, and I watched it with him. But I remember like really hating that character. Like, damn, maybe Doc could have lived if he had stopped the drinking and the smoking and the degenerate gambling and the fucking crazy late night sex sessions and all that stuff. And every time I watch it, I'm like, I think she does the right thing. Like after the doctor says, Doc, you got to stop this or you're going to die. And she instantly lights up a cigarette and starts blowing him. And he's like, you might be the Antichrist. Doc wanted to die with his boots on, and he really tried hard and he didn't. And that seems to him and Wyatt's like the only thing sadder than me being stuck here is you being stuck here with me for no goddamn reason. Like, I know you're my best friend. I know you love me. And if you do, go out there and live your life. Because promise you, brother, if we were in the opposite situation, I would not be here playing cards with you. Yeah. And Kilmer did a hell of a job. That like one single tear to get squeezed out as he's saying, like, if you ever loved me as a friend, then you would get out. It's great. And it sucks that there's 4 or 5 more minutes of movie that we don't care about. And like, even the movie doesn't care about. Like, he comes to Dana Delaney. I somehow he's lost all of his money. I don't know how, because he was. They made it seem like he was like super fucking rich. He lost all. He's like, I don't know how we're going to live. And she's like, my family's rich.
Of
and
course,
the movie's like,
of fucking course they are. It's the only way that in the Wild West, it's the only way ever today in modern society that you can just totally blow off hard work and a life, right? Like you gotta eat to live. You gotta work to eat. Yep. Not her, because her family's fucking rich. Why not? She'll just be this, I don't know, debutante. Is that the word for it?
Probably. Sure.
She just goes around doing whatever the hell she wants because her family's got money. God, what a luxury. What a fucking
Billy
luxury.
Zane, who we haven't talked about, who is just a very pretty man in this film.
Sure.
Yeah,
that's his function.
But I felt like when she goes, "Don't worry, my family's rich," it's like the movie literally took the script and just threw it in the air and said, "Who gives a fuck?" Now kiss and swirl in the snow.
They started the end crawl where it was like, oh, they went on to do, whatever.
Yeah, and Doc, like I love his quote, like when he's like, what did you want? And he's like, I just want to live a normal life. And he says, there is no normal life. There's just life, and you got to live it to the hilt. That's all you can do.
How true.
Words to live and die by if you're Doc Holliday. What else? I got one other question. Why do you think that Doc Holliday looks at his feet and says, now this is funny, right as he dies?
I don't know.
I don't know for sure because I haven't actually looked into this, but I've appreciated that he's referring to the whole like cowboy dying with his boots on, and how ironic it is that he's not, like, after the life that he's lived, all the fucking shit that he's done, the people he's killed, the people he's swindled, that here he is going to die as, like, you know, just this old dude wasting away in a bed.
Makes sense.
But I don't know. That's one of the mysteries of the film that I've pondered these many years.
All right, there's one other thing we definitely have to talk about. I mentioned my confused preteen relationship with this movie. Came out at the same time as this epic Kevin Costner Wyatt Earp movie, which I thought was boring, and I wasn't even about to go watch it. The other thing that confused the hell out of me as a kid, and I always associated with this movie, is the pizzas, the Tombstone pizzas. I don't know why, but as a child, I always thought that they named the Tombstone pizzas after this movie. Am I crazy to think that the Tombstone commercials were Western themed?
They totally are.
Because I remember
Western
the slogan,
themed.
like, what do you want on your tombstone? And they'd always approach him, like the lawman comes in with the gun. What do you want on your tombstone? As the guy's about to be hanged or whatever. And he says pepperoni and cheese. And they all go, what? And then they bring in a pepperoni and cheese pizza to him.
Yeah, no, I just quickly looked up, and apparently this company was founded back in the 60s, and it's named after the fact that the original place these pizzas are served, the Tombstone Tap, was a bar and pizza parlor that was across the street from a cemetery.
Okay.
So
no relation to this movie whatsoever, even though
no relation to this movie.
Ads and okay.
Yeah, and apparently they came up with what do you want on your tombstone in like the 80s as like I don't know, there's some kind of neo-Western thing, and they just thought it would be what do you want on your tombstone, like, you know, pepperoni and mushrooms.
I mean, it's a cool campaign. I still remember it to this day, so clearly it works.
It's the officially licensed pizza of,
right? The Doc Holliday's favorite pizza.
Doc Holliday's favorite pizza. That's right. It's like that's the thing that killed him. The doc said if you eat one more pizza, Holliday, you're gonna be pushing up daisies. And he goes, well, make mine a huckleberry because I want to order it in Latin. In Pizza Veritas.
That's all I got,
no. I'm so glad that Brent commissioned this for us. Brent, thank you very much for your support. I hope you enjoyed your own personal pan podcast. Had a lot of fun. This has been on my probably top 10 things I wanted to podcast for a long time. Thank you for making Jim watching this. I'm so glad that he enjoyed it as well. And thanks again for your support. If you'd like to find out how you can commission your own podcast, all you got to do is go to support.baldmove.com. There's a link on there, but for commissioning it, and you can have us watch up to 2-ish hours of some sort of media and record a podcast about it. Find out how at support.baldmove.com. Thanks once again to Brent. Thanks to everybody listening and supporting us in whatever way you see fit. And we'll see you on the next podcast. Until then, I'm Aaron.
And I'm Jim.
Later.